Welcome back to the Wellness Center podcast. My name is Chase Warburton, and I am so grateful that you're all here today. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the newest episode that we have posted. I'm super excited for the guest that I have on today. This person is resilient. She is powerful. She is amazing. I'll get to introducing her into just a minute. But again, I'm really, really excited to have her on. For those who are just listening for the first time, please make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast so you can get updated on everything we do here, which is destigmatizing mental health, one episode at a time. And as you're listening to this episode as well, I want you to be thinking of one or two people that you know personally in your life that could benefit from the education that my guest is going to teach you today, and share it with those people as you're listening. It's going to be that personal touch to let those people know that you care. So make sure to do that. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest. She is a registered dietitian, a certified personal trainer, a certified intuitive eating counselor, and she is also an eating disorder survivor. She has passions for helping people heal their relationships with food and their bodies. And without further ado, I have Camille Gillespie, if I said that right.
Gillespie.
Gillespie. Well, Camille, welcome
Yeah.
onto the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much. I'm great. Thank you for having me. How are
Good.
you?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. Thank you. And it is, of course, my pleasure. So, for those who don't know, Camille is a friend of my wife's. They served a mission together, and that's how I got the connection here. But so, Camille, for those who don't know you, can you give us some of the cookie cutter question answers as to who you are?
Sure. So I am from Colorado originally.
Hmm.
I grew up in a very small town, loved it there,
Hmm.
and then I went to school in Utah at BYU.
Hmm.
I studied dietetics, graduated in dietetics, and then shortly thereafter became a registered dietitian and started working full time. And then a few months after that, I got my personal training certificate and have been doing that for several years as well. And then I met my husband at the end of 2020 and we got married in 2021 and we just had our first daughter. She
Mm.
is 10 months old now.
Congratulations.
So now we've moved back to Indiana, which is where he's from.
Okay.
And we're just living our lives, having fun,
Nice. Nice. You
raising
are
baby.
Babies are tough. The 10-year-old stage is your daughter. Is she crawling yet?
She is,
Is she
and she
walking?
is walking with our help, and that is
Oh.
all she wants to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exhausting, but it is so much fun. There's
Yeah,
nothing greater than children.
yeah, for sure.
Cool. So okay, let's get right into it, Camille. Let's get really vulnerable here. I want you to take us back to a young Camille. When's the first time you started struggling with mental health?
So, um, that's a good question. I feel like from a young age, and I can't even tell you how old I was because I don't
Hmm.
remember, but I just kind of started the whole comparison game, right?
Hmm.
Comparing myself to other people,
Hmm.
especially my siblings. So
Hmm.
I have five siblings. I'm number five out of six kids.
Gotcha.
And I think I was always kind of the quiet, observant one.
Hmm.
I was never the one who was loud and causing drama and conflicts and fights. I was just quiet. I was content to be by myself and watch and observe.
Right.
And I feel like I'm a very attentive to detail person.
Right.
And so I would watch and observe a lot and pick up on details and things. And this comparison thing just continued. And for whatever reason, I feel like it just kind of became a habit, a bad
Hmm.
habit, of course,
Right.
but it led to a lot of negative feelings.
Mhm.
For example, I felt that my parents didn't love me as much as they loved some of my siblings,
Right.
which of course is not true. But that comparison thing can really get you get you in a bad place in terms of
Yeah.
that negativity. So I don't know why that started or really even when it started, but that was definitely a part of the beginnings of mental health issues.
Yeah.
And I can definitely see now how It caused me anxiety, maybe some mild depression.
Hmm.
Even though I didn't know what I was feeling then, I wouldn't have been able to put it in those words.
Right.
Now looking back, I can see, oh yeah, that was anxiety,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So, and then I feel like I started kind of comparing myself and my body to other people, probably in middle school, early high school.
Okay.
And that's really when I started comparing my looks to other people's
Hmm.
looks, girls, other girls,
Of course.
and just a lot of comparison. And it led to a lot of bad things, which we'll
Yeah.
get into.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into it. And I'm really excited to learn a little bit more. Thank you for sharing. I do definitely have a few questions. So you're 5 of 6.
Mhm.
What were the kind of the age ranges of your siblings that were older than you?
We're all about 1.5 to 2 years apart.
It's
So we're
really
close.
close. Yeah, you're really close.
Mhm.
And what were what were your siblings like that you were comparing, right? Like what about them made you, yeah.
It's a good question. I feel like I compared my relationship to my parents with my
Okay.
siblings' relationships to my parents.
Okay.
So, for example, I have some siblings they were harder than I was because I was just quiet, content. I was never the troublemaker. I was always the
Right.
peacemaker.
Hmm.
And so I feel like my parents, out of necessity, had to give more attention to some of my other siblings.
Right.
And seeing that and then comparing that to my relationship with them and seeing how I wasn't getting as much attention,
Hmm.
that is kind of what made me feel, oh, they must love them more because I'm not anything special. They're not giving me as much attention. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And it's interesting how, especially growing up like in our parents, right? Because I believe we're about the same age. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of the attention that we got growing up was negative attention, right? That's how a lot of kids learn to get that positive or negative attention or affection from their parents, so to say. But yeah, that's really unique. And
Yeah.
um, comparing yourself to others in like the middle school and high school area, was a lot of that with like social media? Was that just in person? Was that friend groups? What did that look like?
Good question. It was mostly in person.
Hmm.
And I don't feel like I did it a lot in my friend groups. I did some,
Hmm.
which was good. But I feel like mostly, oddly, I was comparing myself to people that I wasn't friends with, girls
Interesting.
that I wasn't friends with. And so I did not do a lot of social media in high
Hmm.
school. So I don't feel like that affected me or caused me to compare myself a whole lot.
Good.
I think that's more of a struggle in today's world because I mean that was 10, 15 years ago and it's
Yeah.
definitely more prominent now.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was mostly in person. I still remember so vividly this girl in high school who
Hmm.
I thought was just so beautiful and I don't even know her name. So I don't remember it, but I
Okay.
remember her so much because I would constantly be comparing myself to her because I thought she was so beautiful. I thought she had perfect hair, perfect face, perfect body, and perfect clothing, fashion. And I was constantly asking myself
Hmm.
um, if I was as pretty as her, if
Hmm.
I had as cute of jeans as her. Just it's ridiculous now to relive it, but
Right.
just like random people, mostly in person.
That's really unique. And was there a time where you feel like the maybe the comparison almost came to a head, where like it gotten to such an extreme point that it was kind of like the highest point of the comparison of others?
Hmm. Well, I feel like it just kind of built and built over time
Hmm.
until I started practicing eating disorder behaviors.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that I guess that would be kind of where it summited
Okay.
is when I
Yeah.
actually started changing my behavior because it had become an obsession, right?
Right. And you know what? That actually leads perfectly into my next question, which is called the heroine's or the hero's journey. And for those listening who haven't heard of that before, essentially it is the protagonist, you know, Camille in this story, who had to go through a very, very hard trial in her life. And I know she's mentioned it briefly, was this eating disorder. So Camille, I want to talk about kind of the development of this eating disorder that you talk about, and yeah, I just kind of want to know the history there. So if you could please, yeah, share your heroine's journey with us.
Okay. So I do feel that it all kind of started with the comparison.
Right.
And this kind of built and built over many years, middle
Hmm.
school, high school, early college, my mission. And
Hmm.
then I got home from my mission in April, I believe, or late March of
Hmm.
2016, I believe.
Okay.
And from that is when I really started diving into changing my behavior because
Right.
I wanted to change my body to be better.
Hmm.
um more thin, whatever.
Hmm.
And so um I started very strictly restricting my food intake,
Hmm.
um and over exercising
Gotcha.
every day, pretty much
And
every day.
and this was all at about 21, 22 is when this started happening, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
about.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think I actually might have been 20.
20. Okay.
Yeah, almost 21, I believe. Maybe I was 21. I can't remember. Anyways, so I started eating very few calories per day.
Hmm.
And I never purged, which is when you make yourself throw up after
Hmm.
eating. I never did that. I never did any kind of weight loss medications or anything. It was really solely not eating enough and a lot of exercise.
Hmm.
Um, and so that went on for about 9 months.
Hmm.
So from like March to the end of the year,
Hmm.
basically. And during that time, I lost my menstrual cycle and I lost quite a bit of weight.
Hmm.
and and then a couple things happened
Hmm.
in December that kind of turned things around.
Okay.
So the first thing was I weighed myself. Up until this point, I had not had a scale. I was a broke college student
Uh-huh.
living in crappy apartments. I didn't have a scale. And so
Right.
I hadn't been weighing myself this whole time.
Hmm.
And so I went home for Christmas in December and I got on my parents' scale
Hmm.
and I was shocked at how low the number was.
Hmm.
I'm not going to share the number because that can be triggering for people.
Okay.
But I was shocked at how low it
Yeah.
was. And I remember thinking, wow, that's really low,
Yeah.
but I still want to lose more weight. And that in that moment, I kind of had this realization of like, okay,
Hmm.
something might not be right here, not
Right.
quite right here, right?
Gotcha. There's
Um,
a flaw in the thinking. Yeah.
exactly. So that was definitely kind of a pivotal
Hmm.
moment for me. And then the next really big thing that happened was my diagnosis. So
Okay.
actually, just a few days later,
Hmm.
after I weighed myself and had that kind of moment, I went to the doctor and I went to just get checked up because I had lost my menstrual cycle and I
Hmm.
wanted to figure out what was going on, what was wrong.
Right.
And so that's when she diagnosed me with anorexia nervosa,
Hmm.
which is an eating disorder. And the crazy thing is, I was completely surprised. I truly did not know or think
Hmm.
that I had an eating disorder, which might sound crazy because I just told you how restrictive I was being with my eating and all these behaviors.
Hmm.
But that is just proof of how sneaky eating disorders are.
Right.
Um,
And I know,
so
to also speak to the mental side of things, there's probably a lot of justification and denial there
mhm,
too that allows you to continue on this path that you're trying to go down.
yeah. And the thing was, I truly thought that I was just being quote unquote healthy. Like
Right.
that's truly, I was just trying to be healthy, quote unquote.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so in that moment of my diagnosis, I kind of had to make a decision of whether I was going to continue down this road of restriction and, continue basically starving myself,
Yeah. Yeah.
continue losing weight, and or if I was going to kind of take the necessary steps to heal and get truly healthy.
Right. Yeah.
um, and so my doctor who diagnosed me, she kind of gave me some brief advice on how to increase my food intake.
Hmm.
And so I kind of just took that and ran with it.
Gotcha.
And so I started eating more. I feel like I feel like gaining the weight back was kind of the easy part of
Hmm.
my journey of recovery. I
Yeah.
was able to gain enough weight to get my menstrual cycle back within 3 months of my diagnosis. And while it was difficult to see myself gaining weight,
Hmm.
um, it was worth it to me because I had always wanted to be a mom.
Right.
And I knew that I wouldn't be able to have kids if I didn't have a period.
Right.
So
Right.
that was kind of my motivation was I want to be healthy enough to
Be a
become a mom
mom.
someday. And what I've been doing is clearly not getting me there. So something has to change physically, right?
Yeah.
Um, so gaining that weight back, eating more, not easy, but not impossible. The harder part of my journey was the mental health side.
Yeah.
Was definitely changing my mindset. That took years, not months.
Right.
That took years.
Yeah.
And there were definitely moments along that recovery that were kind of pivotal changes as well.
Hmm.
And some of those would be first, I would say, telling my parents about my diagnosis. I kept
Uh-huh.
it a secret for over a year.
Wow.
And it just became such a burden on me
Yeah.
to be suffering with that alone. And so I told my parents about a year and a few months after my diagnosis.
Mhm.
And that was a big moment for me because I was no longer alone in this really hard thing.
Yeah.
I had some form of support now. I had somebody who at least knew what was going on with me, and that was big.
Hmm. Yeah.
Another, I would say, pivotal moment in my recovery was reading books. Um, I read Intuitive Eating,
Okay.
which is it's an eating framework to help you heal. Um, I would say, I guess disordered relationships with your body and with food.
Hmm.
That was a huge turning point when I read that. I actually read it a couple times because I loved it.
Cool.
I also read a book about eating disorder recovery, which helped me a lot.
Okay.
And then I also went to therapy, which was huge. It was huge in my
Yeah.
recovery. I don't think I would have been able to truly change my mindset without therapy.
That's amazing. So before I dive in and ask you a bunch of questions, I've been writing them down. Thank you for your vulnerability and your willingness to come on here and talk about these hard conversations and relive some of these hard memories. Like I know you said that, choosing disclosing weight can be triggering. I can imagine that just having to relive some of these stories can be hard as well. So thank you for your strength. Thank you for being a
Yeah.
survivor and thank you for being resilient. I really appreciate that. So yeah, I do want to dive in and ask I have a bunch of questions for you, and
Okay.
you perfectly segued into the next question I have, but I want to come back just a little bit. So you said that you were eating a very low amount of calories. So what,
Mhm.
because I know you're a nutritionist and you have a lot of that education. What's a healthy amount of calories that like should be eaten, and how much were you actually eating at that time? Rough estimate.
Yeah. So that's a loaded question,
Okay.
probably more loaded than you realize. So,
Oh yeah, I have
in
no
terms
idea.
of a healthy calorie amount,
Hmm.
it is completely different for every person.
Gotcha. Okay.
It depends on your sex, first of all,
Okay.
but also your age, your activity level. I mean, there are so many things that
Right.
come in to what is going to be a healthy calorie amount for somebody.
Okay. That makes
Um,
sense.
so I don't really have a great answer for that because it just depends. It just
That
depends on who
Yeah,
you are.
and that's totally okay. And that makes total sense too. So thank you. Thank you. But so are you still comfortable answering at that time? How many calories were you intaking?
So yeah, I can answer that.
Hmm.
When during that 9 month period where
Hmm.
I was restricting pretty strictly, I was not counting my calories. I
Okay.
just ate very little.
Gotcha.
um, and the funny thing is, after my diagnosis, which happened in January of
Hmm.
2017, I did start counting my calories,
Okay.
which is a terrible thing to do if you just got diagnosed with an eating disorder because it threw me back into being obsessed with my intake, right?
Right.
But the I justified it by saying, well, I'm going to do this to make sure I eat enough calories.
Gotcha.
And I believe my calorie goal was, I want to say like 1800 to 2000 or something like that. I can't
Uh-huh.
remember exactly.
Uh-huh.
Um, but the interesting thing there was because I had not healed my mindset yet,
Hmm.
if I went 50 calories over one day, I would have to compensate the next day. So if I ate 2050 calories, the next
Hmm.
day I would force myself to eat 1750 or whatever.
Right.
And so it became this unhealthy pattern of
Hmm.
obsessing over my eating.
Right.
And I didn't see it that way at first.
Uh-huh.
But eventually I realized, okay, this is more hurtful than it is helpful. And I need to let this go. So it took me probably a year and a half. I tracked my calories for about a year and a half. And
Hmm.
then I finally stopped and it was very freeing.
Yeah, congratulations. Yeah, I can imagine. It's interesting how us as human beings, right, in our own respective ways, can have an addiction that's unhealthy and then say, wait, I'm going to do this thing that's actually really healthy, but
Mm-hmm.
almost have it because of the addiction and the movement of it, have it become unhealthy again, even in a
Mm-hmm.
healthy justification, throwing up my quotes here for those just listening on the
Yeah.
podcast. But no, thank you. Thank you for answering that. I really appreciate it. That's again, very brave and very vulnerable. And thank you. I know people
Yeah.
listening to this are like, oh my gosh, I need to talk to her. I need, or I need to increase my calories, or, I bet there's a couple people like in the gym listening to this and they're just going to delete their calorie counting app when they're done with this, which I know. Oh, okay. So the 9 months that you were really restricting your calorie intake, and you talked about how your mental health was a big challenge as you were coming out of that diagnosis. Did you notice any decline in your mental health in relation to the strict calorie intake?
Like during the 9 months or after I was diagnosed?
How about both?
Mm. Okay. So, oh, that is a good question. I feel like, yeah. So, first, thinking about the 9 months that I was restricting and over exercising and losing weight, I do feel like my mindset was definitely negative, obviously.
Right.
I was pursuing something that I would never attain.
Hmm.
And that's very frustrating, right?
Right.
I was never satisfied which is very frustrating.
Hmm.
It took me a long time to realize that the pursuit of a quote unquote perfect body
Hmm.
is insatiable. You will never be satisfied,
Right.
at least for those who have eating disorders.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, it was just a lot of obsession about my body,
Right.
and it was a lot of self-hate, honestly, and
Oh,
just
gotcha.
loathing myself for having this disgusting body that I hated so much, and just a lot of um, being down on myself, critical of myself,
Right.
a lot of desire for change, for a different body. So a lot of negativity there.
Absolutely.
Um, and it just kind of, just gets worse and worse.
Right.
Again, it's never relieved, even if your body does change.
Right.
So, and then after my diagnosis, um, I don't know if I would say that my mindset, or was the question like my mental health declined in some way? Is that what you
Right.
said?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So after the diagnosis, was there
Hmm.
any decline in the mental health that you noticed as you started even like counting the calories, right? In an obsessive way?
Yeah, I would say for the first probably year and a half or so,
Hmm.
it wasn't necessarily a decline, but
Okay.
it was just a struggle to
Right.
figure out how to accept my body
Hmm.
and be okay with it,
Hmm.
and stop trying to change it. It was just a struggle. I don't know if I would
Yeah.
say it was a decline, but it was just hard to relearn things and
Yeah.
relearn truths that I had been fighting against.
Right.
Truths like my body doesn't define who I am,
Hmm.
and my body doesn't define my self-worth. Um, that I can be happy no matter what kind of body I'm in.
Hmm.
And these are things that I had to relearn. I had to learn, it felt like from scratch. I mean, I
Right.
knew these things at some point when I was little, but
Hmm.
for so long I had been just hating my body. And
Right.
so it was just a lot of relearning.
Yeah, and you know what? That leads perfectly into my next question, which is the coping skills. So once you got to that space where you were relearning and you were actively changing yourself for the better, what coping skills did you develop at the start and how did they evolve over time?
That's a good question. So I would say I had to, well, I will say first, I learned how to recognize which thoughts were the eating disorder
Hmm.
and which thoughts were me,
Okay,
which was
that's really
very
interesting.
difficult because
Yeah,
they were very intertwined a lot of the times.
yeah,
So I had
absolutely.
to recognize which thoughts were disordered
Hmm.
and versus which thoughts were true, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah, would you be
Um,
willing to give an example?
yeah. So, for example, I would have a thought like, I need to be skinny in order to find a husband, something like that.
Okay, gotcha.
And then I would have to recognize, first of all, that's an eating disorder thought.
Okay.
Or first of all, and then second of
Yeah.
all, that's not true. That's a
Yeah.
lie. That's false,
Yeah,
right?
I love how you're looking at that, outwards, right? It's you take what you're doing from my perspective is you're taking the addict self, right? Is a term that I use, or your eating disorder, and you're placing it out here
Hmm.
off to the side. So you're saying, no, no, that's over there. This
Yeah.
is who I am. I love that. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah. And then just reframing. So, you know, that was a big part of my recovery in terms of
Yeah.
mental health was, and this is what I learned in therapy, was recognize the eating disorder thought or the negative thought,
Hmm.
right? Challenge it and reframe it. And that is a skill that I had to practice a lot.
I can imagine so.
um, Because again, those thoughts were so intertwined with my own, and
Right.
I had been having them so constantly for so long that it was
Hmm.
just kind of my thought process. And so I had a lot of restructuring and reframing to do.
Yeah.
But that's definitely a skill that I took away, is that I continue to practice that.
Hmm.
When I have negative thoughts coming in, recognize it, challenge it, reframe it. And that's a really important coping skill that I still need, and I think we all need it.
100% agree with you. Is someone who also, like, I struggle with mental health issues a lot, and to be able to say, you know what, no, I am a great person, or I am a great father,
Mhm.
regardless of how I might have shown up in this situation, is true. Is very true. So yeah, I think that was a nugget of gold. So for those listening, go back and listen to that 5 or 6 times, because she just gave you an invaluable skill that people use constantly. What were some other coping skills that you've developed?
Um, so one that was very specific to my eating disorder was being able to sit with my feelings without using food as a relief.
Okay.
So often I would, because I was starving myself,
Uh-huh.
if I did give myself an opportunity to eat
Hmm.
without limits, I would often overindulge.
Gotcha.
And a lot of times I would use food as a comfort when I was having difficult emotions.
Hmm.
Um, so for example, I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah, I would love it.
I remember one time I had made a pan of brownies to go to some event. I can't even
Oh,
remember what the
okay.
event was.
It doesn't
And
matter. You made brownies. That's the most
I
important
know,
part. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I was in a hurry.
Uh-huh.
So I had just pulled them out of the oven before I had to leave.
Uh-huh.
And so I didn't realize that you have to wait for the brownies to cool before you try to cut them into pieces. So I pulled them out of the oven. I like have to leave right now. So I just like start cutting them like crazy.
Uh-huh.
And because it wasn't like firm yet or
Uh,
cooled,
yeah.
it just made them a mess. Like it was terrible.
Oh
They
no.
looked terrible. So anyways, I'm like, whatever, I have to go. So I grab them. I go to this event. It was like a potluck thing. A bunch of people had brought a bunch of stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so my pan of brownies sat there on the table with all these other beautiful foods, and it looked terrible. And
Oh
nobody
no.
took a single piece. Nobody ate them. And
Oh
so I was like, that's
no.
fine. I didn't care. I wasn't like offended,
Right.
but I was like, whatever. So I'm leaving the event now. It's over, and I have a whole pan of brownies.
Hmm.
That's sitting next to me now in my passenger seat in my car.
Hmm.
And I was just driving home. I think I
Uh-huh.
had like a 30-minute drive, and I took a piece, I started eating it. And then I just kept eating it. And as I'm eating, I start feeling guilty about what I'm eating. So
Uh-huh.
there's a very difficult emotion. And
Right.
because I was having a difficult emotion, I
To the
continued to
brownies.
turn to the brownies to comfort me. And, you know, I ate the whole pan of brownies, um, which is a lot of brownies. But I was able to learn how to deal with emotions,
Hmm.
negative emotions, strong feelings, without needing food as a comfort. And that was a really big obstacle for me to overcome.
Yeah.
One reason that I could do it is because I started feeding myself normally again.
Yeah.
Because the
Okay.
thing is, when we restrict in any way, um, it eventually leads to overconsumption. And so the fact that I was able to feed myself enough every day definitely helped me not overconsume.
Hmm.
But also, as I just grew my emotional strength, I was able to sit with my emotions without needing a distraction in the form of food. And that's again something that I use now to this day, where I'm able to sit in my emotions
Hmm.
if I'm going through a challenge or whatever, and I'm able to just process them, and I don't need food, I don't need a distraction to just sit and feel. And that is very helpful for me when I'm going
Oh,
through difficult
absolutely.
things, to be able to just take a moment to feel.
No, I love that. And that is so true. Thank you for sharing that. That again is another nugget of gold. So thank you for sharing that. So in this process of your coping skills, you decided to go to school, obviously, and you became a dietitian and a certified personal trainer and all of these things, and an intuitive eating counselor. How long in the process did you decide, you know what, I'm I want to help other people work through what I've worked through? What did that look like for you?
That is a very good question. I feel like it's still evolving,
Cool.
um,
Love it.
because my profession as a dietitian is often looked at as a person who tries to help other people lose weight, right? When you hear dietitian, a
Right.
lot of people think, oh, I could talk to her, she could help me lose weight.
She's going to give me a diet.
And
Yep.
right, exactly. Um, and when I wanted to become a dietitian, that was never my dream to
Right.
help people lose weight.
Okay.
um, but what I wanted to do was just to help people be healthy, to eat in a way that would optimize their health. Sorry, I'm really thirsty. My
Oh, you're
throat is
good.
dry. And when I became a dietitian, I really just wanted to focus on either eating disorders and helping people overcome them, or just helping people be healthy in general, right?
Right.
But what I found was most of the time when somebody comes to see a dietitian, it's because they want to lose weight.
Right.
And that has been really difficult for me because I don't really want to help people lose weight.
Okay.
I want to help people feel good about their current body and to
Right.
accept their current body and to love their current body.
Hmm.
Because I myself know how terrible it feels to be at war with your body, because
Right.
I was in that, right? I was deep in that, and it was miserable. And so when people come to me with a desire for weight loss, I really struggle with that,
Yeah.
because I don't want to give them a diet. I want to tell them, hey, you can love yourself right now, and you can accept your body right now, and you don't need to lose weight
Hmm.
to feel good about yourself.
I love that.
Um, so it's definitely been a challenge. I
Yeah.
I sometimes wonder if I need to be in a different field. No, I'm kidding.
No,
But
it's
I do wonder sometimes if I would be better, if I would feel better if I was working in the eating disorder field as a dietitian. Because right now I just work clinically
okay.
at a hospital. And so that's always kind of been my dream, is to work with eating disorder patients. And I just haven't had that opportunity yet as a dietitian. So that's still the goal.
That's awesome. I love that. And that is so cool. And so a question for you, for those people who are sitting there thinking, I need to lose weight, right? And it's not the thought that you say, right? They need to love their bodies, is you've worked with people over time, and I know you've probably seen some amazing results here, is people learn to love their bodies. What actually happens, right? When they're not focused on losing weight, but learning to love themselves authentically, what
Mm,
changes happen in people?
well, they're happier for one.
Good. Right.
um, but they're also, I feel like, I feel like to answer that question, I kind of have to talk about, I mean, it's a mental health thing, right? It's a
100%.
mindset shift. And I
Hmm.
feel like people are able to be in a healthier place
Hmm.
in terms of mental health when they are able to let go of things that they can't control. So,
Right.
using the weight as an example, you cannot directly control your weight or your body, aside from your skeletal muscle, right? I can move my arms, whatever. I can
Right.
control that. I can control my speech, my eyes. Like there are some things we can control on our
Hmm.
bodies, but there are many things we cannot control, or at least
Hmm.
directly control.
Right.
We cannot control if we start feeling sick, right? But we can't control our body in that
Just
moment,
happens.
and we cannot directly control our weight, which is what trips up a lot of people because they think they can control their weight.
Yeah.
But really, if we could control our weight, then there would be many people who would not be in larger bodies because they would control that to be in a smaller body.
Right.
So when people are able to accept their here and now body, as we say, um, they are letting go of something that they cannot control. And that is incredibly freeing.
Yes.
And I feel like that's something we talk about in mental health is figure out what you actually can control
Right.
and figure out what you can't control and what you're trying to control. And you have to somehow let go of the things that you can't control. And when
Yeah.
you're able to do that and you just focus on what you can control,
Free at
you're
last.
going to be in such a better place mentally, right?
Yeah, that is amazing. And it's so unique because I don't come from I do struggle with carbs. I will be real and upfront. That is definitely my vice. But my background with addiction definitely comes from drugs and alcohol and those types of things. So to hear a lot of those same principles from my realm also be very applicable and real in the realm of eating disorders is really unique to me and eye-opening. That
Yeah.
maybe there's even a broader group of people who can empathize with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also really unique that you talk about now we can't control our bodies because I was not under the impression of that, which is cool, right? And I fully trust you there. So it just goes to show that the training of the world needs a slight adjustment. So
Yes,
that is
for
so cool.
sure.
Thank you. And obviously you have come so far in your journey and you're so resilient now, right? With the skills that you have, the tools that you use, the people you help. Looking back at everything you've gone through, what can you appreciate about your journey up to this point?
Well, I definitely appreciate the emotional strength that I've gained and those coping skills, like we just talked about, that I've
Yeah,
gained. Um, because it helps me deal with my current challenges, right?
right.
Which is huge. And I would also say I am very grateful to be in a healthier place mentally because I have much more self confidence
Yeah.
and a much more positive body image. And
Good.
I'm just so much happier now because of that. Because, like I was just saying, because I've chosen to let go of things that I can't control or
Hmm.
things that really aren't that important,
Hmm.
I'm in such a healthier place mentally. And I'm really grateful for that. Um, so just like the confidence, I guess. And then
Yeah.
I would say, um, I'm grateful that I can be empathetic. I can truly understand how somebody is feeling when they're going through similar similar struggles that I went through.
Yeah.
It brings me a lot of joy to be able to say I truly know how you feel, and because I was in it, I was there with you,
Right.
and it doesn't have to feel like this, and it won't feel like this forever, and it's okay, and you're not alone. And that brings me a lot of joy to be able to empathize with people.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. That is true appreciation. And for those who are just listening, I don't know if you could feel it the way that she portrayed it, but there was so much passion behind those statements, right? There was so much love in her eyes as she was thinking about sharing that story with people. So that is so cool. So Camille, thank you. And last
Thank
question
you.
that I have for you today. Um, for those just getting into the world of mental health, for those just realizing that they have these eating disorders, what advice do you have for those people?
Ask for help.
Hmm.
That is my number one piece of advice because I waited almost 2 years to get help, and you
Mhm.
can't do it by yourself. Just stop trying to think that you can do it by yourself, because you can't.
Right.
And it's okay and it's good to get help. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength, I think, to ask for help. I would say shift your focus from what you can't control to what you can control. Again, just going back to that, it's so powerful and it's so empowering
Mhm.
to just focus on what you truly can control and stop believing that you can control your weight, because you cannot directly control your weight, and learn to accept that in whatever way you need to, and you're going to be a lot better off mentally. um yeah, and then I guess I would just say just remember, I'm trying to think of how to word this.
Yeah, take your time.
I would just say, in terms of like expectations, I think a lot of times in eating disorders or even just in dieting, a lot of people expect that once they have a certain body, then X, Y, and Z, then they'll be happy, then they'll find a partner, whatever.
Right.
And that is not true. It's a lie that the eating disorder implants in our brains.
Uh-huh.
Because the truth is that we don't have to, our circumstances and our situation doesn't necessarily have to change for us to get those things in life that we want,
Right.
or for us to be happy, or whatever you're seeking,
Mhm.
or for us to be confident, right? I talk to so many people who tell me that they want to lose X amount of weight because they're going on a trip and they want to look good in the pictures and they want to feel confident in a bathing suit or whatever.
Right.
And I just can't help but think you you can feel confident in yourself and in your body
Mhm.
if you would change your mindset. It's
Got
not
it.
that your body needs to change, your mind needs to change. And that's what I want people to know, because it's so empowering if you can change your mind. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's
Yes, it
very
is.
hard to change our thought process. It's probably the hardest thing that we can do, but we can, and it just takes work. Um, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
that
I
no,
felt
that's
like I started
amazing.
babbling.
No, it's great. And it's I practice this term called rigorous acceptance, which, the answer was given the way it was supposed to because it was, right? So you shared everything that needed to be shared, and I really appreciate that, Camille. So obviously by we're done with the episode, right? I've asked all these great questions, and people are thinking, man, how can I get in contact with Camille? I need her advice. I want to hire her. Social media, do you have websites? How can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, I would say the best place to go is probably Instagram.
Okay.
And that will kind of lead you everywhere else.
Okay.
I do have a Facebook page and a website, but Instagram is probably where I'm most active. So
Okay.
my Instagram page is just Inside Out Nutrition LLC with um underscores. Is that how you say it? Underscores between the words.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Perfect. And I'll make sure to put that in the description.
sure.
If I can spell nutrition right, we'll make sure we get people over your way. No,
It's
Camille,
a hard one.
it is. I didn't do good in English, but that's okay. So, Camille, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, it was. And for those who again are listening to this point, please make sure to like and subscribe. If you haven't shared the episode already, please make sure to do so with those one or two people that I know have come to your mind. I know I'm going to share this episode with a few people as well. If you need to get in contact with me or would like to come on the show, just understand that no name or no story is too big and no name is too small. If you do have a story, I want to share it all. If you want to know more about what I do on a day-to-day basis, you can go to www.thewellnesscenter.life. If you want to get in contact with me personally, you can contact me at chase@thewellnesscenter.life. Again, thank you for your time, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Peace out.